Well, let's not delve down that foreskin hole right now, possibly.
Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me so hard.
But do you know what? We're a serious podcast as well as a stupid one.
Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Neutral Cider Hotel, the home for supreme cider knowledge and general randomness. My name is Gabe Cook. I am the ciderologist, which of course is a completely made up word. And well, most things I do are made up, but I do get to talk all day about cider. What a joy. And I might have mentioned in the previous podcast, I can't remember, I've got a book called Ciderology, which is available now. So do go check that out. As ever, I'm joined by two great friends and two fantastic cider aficionados, Mr. Martin Goodwin-Sharman and Mr. Grant Hutchison. Hello, gents. Martin, how are you, sir?
All right. Yeah, I'm good. I went on holiday to Cornwall and drank cider all weekend. Yeah, that's my day.
But that's just a normal weekend, then. That's what you normally do.
Yeah, well, it was nice to go back to the root of it all and just drink cider somewhere else.
View, basically.
Yeah.
It's a very expensive cider. There was the fuel to pay for and everything. I mean,
well, the cider was free though, so I will say swings and roundabouts, but it was fucking lovely anyway. But it was just good to, in this chaos, just fuck off for a weekend while we can.
You are a Cornish boy, aren't you, as well? So it was literally going back to the roots.
Yeah, exactly.
Very nice. Now, you are known as the cider shit. Tell us a little bit about what it is that you do for cider.
I like the cider shit,
yeah,
but
like that. That's
good. the one, and there's many shits, but he's the shit. But no,
you said it, not me.
I used to run a pub in Hackney that had loads of cider in called the Cock Tavern. I then worked in and ran a bottle shop in Finsbury Park with Clapton Craft and bought cider for their sites. Moved to Bristol and since have just been drinking a load of it and promoting it on Instagram and anywhere I can. It's basically reviewing it in a very polite way because I only get stuff I like and I just keep liking it. It's just painfully secular kind of thing.
Nice. Sounds good. Happy days. That's the dream. That's what everyone wants to do, you see. You mean you're practically a ciderologist. A ciderologist, not the ciderologist.
I've not invented a word. I've just repurposed shit. So that's...
What a word to repurpose. How do you follow on from that, Grant? It's quite an intro there. So what? Tell us about yourself and your cider journey.
My cider journey began as a touring musician, realizing that there was more to cider than Magners or Strongbow or anything you could get in most pubs in Scotland. Touring the UK, discovering the cider shop in Bristol and the Apple, and not listening to the recommendations of this one's served in a half pint, maybe you should just have one. And that, I don't remember what that one was. Now most of the ciders I drink are generally wouldn't serve by the pint anyway. Serve them in a 750ml bottle, which is even more. It's great.
So you're buying cider by the nearer the litre portion than just as a pint now. So
yeah, but I mean,
you can take the boy out the band, but
you know by the reputation of cider in Scotland and the blue plastic bottles. That's our second to Buckfast, probably. It used to be our national drink until minimum pricing came in, which I'm thankful for because it's obliterated that cheap market and it's allowed me to swan in with my posh stuff. So
there he is. Yeah. Same drinkers as well. There's no discerning nature between them.
They are the same people. It's great. They're about the same price.
What was your first?
They're about the same price now.
All right. First off, what the fuck are you doing, Gabe?
Sorry,
that was a hostage video.
That was the pig. That was the pig of knowledge. Wishing to just check once again. Very good. The pig of knowledge will pop up from time to time, snaffling around the ankles of us as we talk away here. Occasionally, we might utilize some kind of term that is a little bit sort of specialized. We want to make sure that absolutely everybody at least has the opportunity to enjoy this podcast as much as they possibly can. And so if we do have to say something a little bit technical, maybe we'll just do a little segue. Thanks to the pig of knowledge there, just sort of making sure that we know what's going on. So, Grant, you mentioned minimum pricing there. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what that is and why it's made cider more expensive, or some ciders more expensive?
Well, it was brought in by the Scottish government. It's not in England, right? Am I right in saying that?
You're correct. Yeah.
Alcohol above a certain ABV, am I right? Is charged. There's a minimum price that you have to pay for that, or the minimum price across all alcohol, which means that cider served in a 3-litre bottle at 11-12% cannot be sold for £3.99 anymore. It was, I guess, introduced as a way to combat cheap sales of high strength alcohol, to tackle a problem that we definitely have in Scotland. There's mixed opinion on whether that's the right way to approach a problem like that, or whether that's just pricing out a certain group of people who earn a certain amount of money. So yeah, that's minimum pricing, and it definitely had a massive effect on that style of drink and those drinkers.
Bravo.
Thanks for keeping that light. Fucking hell.
Well, what was I meant to say?
No, yeah. There's no way to comedically do it, and I feel that you got stitched up because
Sorry,
I didn't approve of the pig. The pig came out of nowhere.
I might change the pig. The pig might morph into another animal at some stage during the podcast. I'm sorry about that. That was a bit left field. So maybe we'll go. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens next.
But
yeah, it just was like,
Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me so hard.
it's proper snuffy. It didn't feel right, and then you were just
that
like,
was absolutely not my intention. I can assure you of that. So moving swiftly on.
Tell us about social problems in Scotland.
Yes. But do you know what? We're a serious podcast as well as a stupid one.
We are
Exactly.
serious. Grant, please allow yourself to do a gratuitous plug. We do all the time as to your business within the cider world. You're doing some good stuff.
My business is called Restock, and it's unfortunate that you can't see how that's written because it's really clever. Restock being the act of refilling empty shelves. But what I've done, instead of spelling it STOCK, can you guess? I think Gabe's got it. I spelled it STALK. Eh? Yeah. Like
Restock.
There's a colon in there because everyone loves a colon. Stock. So that's it. And I distribute ciders to bars, restaurants, off licenses around the UK. I've started importing some from the US and Sweden as well. So yeah, it's just kind of at the moment just the main focus is the mission of getting more people to appreciate more ciders that they maybe haven't heard of or that they didn't realize existed or they didn't know what cider could be. So it's basically what I'm saying is it makes no money, but it's good fun and it's getting people to drink good cider. So yeah, support me.
Have you got a book?
I'm sorry, Gabe. I don't have a book. Actually,
it's my advice. Don't bother.
Gabe, sorry. Do you have? Is it just one book or?
I have one book published, Ciderology, as we might have mentioned before, but it's true. Oh, look, our producer is waving a book in our general direction. It looks beautiful. Nice one, Scott. And some good bedtime reading. It's very soporific. I've got I'm going to write another book for camera. Yay! Coming out next year. So ciderology will be in a more modern British cider will be the next read. And I said that just like Max de Winter from Rebecca, Daphne du Maurier novel. Amazing. We had the audiobook on our travels up to Scotland, my girlfriend and I.
All right, you read books, Gabe. We get it. You read books.
No. I didn't even read that one. There was an audiobook.
Oh, you listened to it.
Even better, just in the car.
I do as well, actually. It's really good.
Do you love an audiobook?
So you say the ciderology is done. Does that mean you've sold out all the copies, or?
Absolutely not. What do you think? I'm doing a good terrific plug every time. No, there are still a few very limited copies out there. You are no, I mean, it's the bare bones truth. There's still a few very limited copies out there, so go rush, panic buy that ciderology today instead of something that might be a little bit more productive as we potentially move into more challenging times over the winter. But let's keep things lighthearted. This is cider after all. Let's run into a little bit of cider news. So now at Neutral Cider Hotel, we are going to have a review of the latest events in cider world. It's the news. Let's see what we've got. So out recently came the results of the International Cider Challenge, which is a global competition run in the UK by a rather dashing gentleman who has some large facial hair. That's right. It's Grant. No, it's me. It was me. So I'm the chair of judges of this international cider competition, but I did have the great pleasure of having Martin and Grant on part of the judging panel. It's normally a big event that takes place in a room in London, lots of people over one day, very hectic, of course. Because of the COVID conditions, that wasn't possible. So we did it virtually. Judges all sat around a Zoom table, each, three of them, and they judged a load of different ciders, split into different categories, and they each came to a conclusion as to whether a cider was worthy of a gold, silver, or bronze medal, what standard of cider was it at, and we finally managed to get down to a number of golds and indeed a supreme trophy winner, which happened to be a rosé cider, a sparkling, a full sort of method traditionnel champagne style sparkling cider made in Kent in England. Jake's it's called, from the Hush Heath winery, one of the finest wineries in the UK. And so I'm pretty chuffed. I think that's a great cider, and overall I thought the entries were pretty good. But anyway, I'm just the fluffy mouthpiece. I got my judges here. What did you think of the process of the judging, and especially sort of doing it virtually? It's all a bit different, isn't it?
Yeah. But one thing as well with it being, because I did it before lockdown and then we did this one in lockdown. So it was quite fresh how it was last year, but I really liked it this year being digital. But the only thing was, if you as a table had a difference of opinion on one drink, you couldn't check to see if it was the bottle or anything. There was a bit of that, but it made you stick to your guns harder than being swayed. So I liked that judging it seriously. There were loads of great ciders in this year, and if you found one that you thought was amazing or good, bad, or not categorizable, you had to stick by your guns. So it was a good test of it, I think.
Grant, this is your first time judging in a competition. What did you think of the process?
Yeah, it was great. I enjoyed it a lot. For me, because it was my first time, I felt like maybe the remote digital thing put my nerves at ease a little bit. I felt like a bit, not really knowing exactly how the process works. It felt more comfortable doing that. I can definitely, by the end of it, I did wish I was in a room with a lot of other people who had also been drinking lots of cider. But no, it was brilliant. It was great. And its standard was outstanding. We had some really amazing stuff, and a very little that wasn't didn't get a medal at all. So yeah, I think it's a great thing to have a global event or tasting, judging competition like that. I hate saying competition because it's like it's a weird thing. You know, it's the same with music when you have competitions and trophies and things. It's kind of like, well, everyone just create what they create and people can enjoy it and like it. But yeah, it was brilliant. Good way to start a conversation, and really interesting to hear whether someone you know is very knowledgeable and you might know what they like and what they don't like, and to hear them say, "Oh yeah, that's I'm not going to give that anything," and you quickly scribble out your gold medal. Yeah,
I concur.
No, that didn't happen at all.
We did have one, I think the year before, that I called it was something. What did I say, Gabe? I can't remember.
You said it tasted like a pig's scrotum. You see, it is indelibly foreskin. Sorry, wrong bit of the wrong bit of the giblets. It tastes now, which throws up many further questions, Martin. Let's be fair. Especially given so that you are vegan, which as to, well, let's not delve down that foreskin hole right now, possibly. We'll save that for the other podcast.
It's a dreamer's palate I have.
Gabe, can you believe you just said, let's not dive down that foreskin hole? Did you ever think that would be a sentence on a cider podcast?
I will say, in the news of the competition, and I will say it's a competition. I'm not afraid, Grant. But on the Mail Online, it says Aldi Australia's apple cider has been voted one of the best in the world, and it costs just $1.69 per can. And they basically go on to say that it's been picked by alcohol experts and the like, such as us, which I think goes to prove that a lot of preconceptions you have about cider going into it, you do judge books by its cover. And that if that means that in Australia there's going to be an entry-level cider for someone that you don't have to fork out a shed ton for, it's just all the better, really.
Well, yeah, we should probably say, I don't know if it was mentioned that it's a blind tasting. I mean, it seems obvious to us, but none of us knew.
That's a good shout.
None of us knew what we were tasting. The bottles or cans all arrived wrapped in bags, so you couldn't see the labels. So that, again, that's, like you said, it's great that it gives ciders like this a chance to, you know, a cider from Aldi to go up against, you know, something more perceived as more craft or more small batch or more artisan, is and for it to come up. Was it a trophy? It was a trophy, right? So it won its category.
A trophy for the New World category. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So
what's good though is, what's good with that as well is that, like you say, if you weren't ever going to go to that, at least now, if I'm ever in Aldi in Australia, I'll go, no, right where to go. But it's just, I think it's fucking great. Like there's a cider for every occasion, and I think put your money where your mouth is and try the ones from everywhere and find the ones you love and start raving about them, really.
Absolutely. So yeah, it's these competitions are, it's kind of what you said, Grant, in terms of a little bit like being like music. Everybody does have a different preference and everybody's endeavoring to try and do their own things. And it is the joy of these competitions that it's rare that the very same ones win every single time, but you would be amazed as to how many ciders or particular ciders from cider makers always fare particularly well in these competitions, because the guidelines that people like myself put together are based a little bit around the concept of there being some styles. You know, otherwise, you know, to say that a cider that is really, really bold and earthy and tannic is inherently better than something that is light and lean and fresh just because it's got a greater level of mouthfeel, let's say. I don't agree with that. I would just say that they are very, very different products. They're different ciders. It's like saying that from a wine perspective, that a Malbec is better than a Pinot Grigio just because it is. You personally may prefer it or not, but that's a very subjective opinion rather than being sort of objective. So yeah, it's great. Things like this give all cider's the opportunity to shine, and especially, as you said, Grant, without going in with any sort of prejudice or bias or sort of preconceived ideas of what it is that you are voting for. It is fun on occasion what things kind of pop up, and also what ciders you thought might have made it, didn't actually sort of get any medals. It reminds me of the Big Apple, which is happening in fingers crossed still in October in Herefordshire. And it's a competition that normally happens back in May, and you peer review. So if you enter into a category, you actually get to have a vote. It's a different kind of competition. And obviously the aim of the game as a cider maker, if you're entering into a category, is to try and find your own and vote for it, obviously. And so, but once again, all the ciders are anonymized, and there's different sort of numbers and codes associated with it. So next to each, sort of write down the number and sort of what you thought tastes nice, bit funky, egg, etc. And so when you'd be surprised when the results were announced, it was my brother and I, we made this cider, we entered it into the competition. The one that we voted for that we thought was our cider was obviously not our cider. It was the one that indeed won, because it was a good cider. It just obviously wasn't ours. So we looked at what we wrote down against 704, and it said, "Smells of ass." Well, that was rather unfortunate, wasn't it? So you never know what might happen in competition circumstance. It's always,
you don't know. You don't know what pig foreskin you're going to get.
Well, it's happened before, and dare I say, it'll happen again. What else is happening in the news, Martin?
Well, I haven't got the article, but I think I think this is one for Grant, actually. What news outlet brought up this story that we're going to clear some man's name? Was it Daily Mail again?
We're going to
go down here.
Clear one man's name and out one man for being a ridiculously stupid racist. So the Independent. This is the who ran it in the UK anyway. There was a story about an apple orchard in Minnesota in the US who recently kind of made, I don't want to say made the news, made headlines with, for some posts on their Facebook page. They made a statement kind of outlining restrictions on the orchard in relation to what most of us would describe or would call the correct name, COVID-19. This gentleman decided to refer to it as the China virus.
Cool guy.
Guy. Unfortunate.
Unfortunate, but stupid is what I would say, and racist.
Well, quite.
Sorry, Martin, what were you going to say?
Well, the actual headline from The Independent is, "Owners of Apple Orchard get schooled on the fruit's origin after racist rant about China." And unfortunately, there is a picture beneath, and it says, "An apple orchard in Minnesota is under fire, ranting about, quote unquote, the China virus." But who's in that picture, Gabe? Who's?
Well, I don't believe he's ever been to Minnesota. It is Somerset cider legend, poor old Mr. Roger Wilkins, who's stood there in the glorious, early autumnal sunshine. I do believe this photo is a few years old, gazing wondrously onto his Tremlets bitter or something like that. And he's somehow been caught in the crossfire of a China virus fiasco. And it's very unfortunate that he's been dragged into this. And I do believe that across a few social media platforms, there has been a bit of a wave of support for Roger to ensure that everyone knows that how ridiculous could it be that he would be in Minnesota? He's not in Minnesota. He's what's the name of it?
Is it Mudgley or something? It's in Somerset.
Mudgley.
Because this article actually led me on to Roger's website, which is kind of a hoot as well. It's just great. It's just, I don't know if he's written it, but it's been written from his perspective, a lot of it. So the kind of contact us page is, still open, but not sure for how much longer. So if you can't get here to the farm, and that's ear to the farm, why not call me and order some cider and cheese to be sent direct to you? Don't email me, as I don't do email. Just call me at lunchtime or tea time. I'm a busy farmer and I'm working other times. It's brilliant. It's just so perfect. I visited with Gabe. You took me there last year.
It was last May, yeah, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just felt like one of the most real cider experiences I've ever had. 3 barrels.
Yeah, it is a great sort of living embodiment, a last sort of bastion of that traditional, Somerset, Devon, West Country, farm cider kind of concept, whereby it is, if it was being utilized in modern wanky parlance, it would be, minimal intervention, wild ferment and sulfite free and all of that. And it's very much is all of those things. And it does make the cider a bit raw and rambunctious on occasions, especially if it leaves the farm. I seem to remember that we tasted it out the Barrel Grant, and I think it still had it all. It held itself together. It was bold and bristling and pretty furry and meaty and all the sorts of adjectives that I don't know why I'm saying. But it was still a really, really good cider, a kind of raw cider, but it held it all together. I think it's one of those that it's just all about experiencing it in the context of where it's made.
Yeah, and there was a wall behind the barrels or opposite the barrels where visitors had stuck stickers or written their name or something like that, and there was so many cider makers or cideries from around the world had put up their sticker to say that they were there. And I think I'm right in saying it's a bit of a sort of mecca for cider makers, certainly from the US, who'll travel over the I have to go to Wilkins, have to go and see what's happening there, and it's it's a farm, where they make cider, and it's great. It really, if you want a true cider experience, head there to lunchtime or tea time. Close early on a Sunday so you can have a quiet Sunday lunch. And this is me again quoting from his website. Yeah. So yeah.
The favorite thing for me about the experience, and I hadn't been for 10 years, and it hadn't really changed a lot, which is really heartening, was not just it's the drinking the cider. It was the fact that you got these. Roger wasn't even actually there when we visited. He was out, was having an extended lunch, but there were just other patrons who were helping us and serving us and offering us hunks of cheddar the size of my head, which is not inconsiderable. And I also seem to remember having emu eggs for sale alongside some Barbara Carter novels. I mean, what more do you want in life? It was brilliant. It was utterly brilliant. So, Roger, we are defending you to the hilt from this slanderous utilization of your photograph next to Minnesotan idiots. Yeah. So we all love you and back.
I was going to say, I like that our podcast now has finally tapped into the Emu Egg podcast fan market, and there is some crossover appeal, because I've been looking at that scene for years now.
What a market that is. I mean, that's us made.
That's the one we want to crack.
Oh, you got. Oh, geez.
There he is, little prick.
What is this? What are you?
Egg puns.
Crack. You want to crack the egg? Come on, Grant.
I'm not listening to either of you. I stopped listening when you said ostrich egg. So I'm just waiting for a cue.
I get that. I get that a lot, though. That's the problem in my life.
So this evening, ladies and gentlemen, we have got a very special guest who comes from a slightly different cider making part of the UK. He's actually one of my favourite cider makers at the moment, and I had the pleasure of going to meet him. He is not in England. He's not in Wales. That's right. He's on the Isle of Man. Only joking. He is up in Scotland. Yes, that's right. Scotland does make cider. We, this evening, are speaking to Mr. Ryan Seeley from the Caledonian Cider Company.
Hello.
Ryan. Thank you very much for joining us, Ryan. And not that anybody can see, but you've got a beautiful Britney-esque microphone. That's the first for here on the Neutral Cider Hotel. And you are wearing it so well. Either that or that you are trying to sell some double glazing over the phone. Either way, much appreciated. I know that, and it's always good to start off an interview with an insult. But I know that you're busy chap. Yes, you're a cider maker, but you also have, your day job is booze as well, but it's distilling, and your background is, you're from heart of cider making down in Devon, and you've cut your teeth at Thatcher's and Healy's, and then you've come north of the border to make cider and also to make whiskey. We had a bit of a chat about this when we spoke the other week in terms of around there being the potential of a Scottish cider identity, and what the term sort of Scottish cider means to you right now, or what its opportunity is. What do you think?
I we're really still kind of at the beginning of finding out what a Scottish cider is. I think that the first Scottish cider maker would probably be Thistly Cross, I think. And they've been going at a good, 8, 9, maybe even 10 years, something like that now. So still pretty young, really, in cider terms, given that like Gamers was 1480 or something crazy like that, they started. But we're still it's still at the stage where it can be almost anything.
And you use a blend of, you predominantly, your cider making is about utilizing local fruit, because for anybody who didn't know, apples do grow as far north as Inverness, where you're very close to, just north of, and you've got a bit of a sort of sheltered climate there. And you've got varieties such as James Grieve, which is a classic sort of Scottish variety. You personally have planted up a small number of sort of classic West Country apple varieties. So, is it sort of incumbent around the choice of apple varieties, do you think, or just about the fact that these things are grown in your place and sort of bringing in the whole aspect of terroir into the proceedings?
Yeah, on that, I would say, so I've used certain key varieties for my whole cider making sort of career. Varieties that everybody knows, all the cider type people know, with like Dabinet, Red Streak and Yarlington Mill and things like that. But what I would say is that they're different when you get them in different places. So I've had the privilege of making cider using Dabinet apples in Somerset and in Cornwall. I never used any when I was in Brittany, but now I'm using Dabinet up here, grown up here, and they're all different. Dabinet grown on the Black Isle, it isn't the same as Dabinet grown in Somerset or in Hereford. They're all slightly different. So there's always going to be something about that, even if you're the most sort of far removed from the natural sort of cider world, industrial sort of maker that's in it. You're still going to be, there's still going to be something of your area that's in your product.
What are the challenges of making cider in your area? And trying to explain it to someone who especially isn't from the UK, but what makes Scotland hard to make cider? Why is this not been done really much?
Yeah, so we're about 700. Oh, there's an enormous spider just coming across my line. It's fine. I'm not gonna panic. But the thing is, I'm tied onto this computer with these headphones, and I feel like if I need to get up and get away, I don't
Ryan,
know.
I've met you. You are quite a manly man. You've got broad shoulders and you've got a decent girth of bicep. This is quite amusing.
If you want, you can take off the headset for a second and
That's good.
move if you want.
Yeah, sure? The cat's just come in. Cat's gonna eat the spider. It's great.
Well, I was obviously going to interject and say I can tell you that from the Devon-Cornwall border, it is 655 miles to your house, Ryan, because I drove it just about in one day the other week. So it is It is effectively like a continent in a way.
Yeah, it's a really good distance away, and our weather is so different to what we get down in the southwest. So we're working with the same apple varieties, but the thing with those varieties, like I said, with the Dabinet and the Arlington Mill, is they're all in. She didn't eat the spider, by the way, it's still there. I wish I still had my phone. I could turn it around and shown you this beastly thing. Like, it's what a size. So
That's a
all of
different
these
podcast.
apples, all of these apples are indigenous to those areas. So you have like Somerset apples, you have Hereford apples, you've got Cornish apples, you've got Devon apples, and they're all from that specific area. So really interesting things start to happen when you pick them up and take them to somewhere else. So we're in a totally different climate up here. So it's kind of like, it's a bit like the first time they took Pinot Noir from France and took it out to California and put it in the ground and said, is this going to work? Is anyone going to like this? Can we even make wine in California? You know, it's a little bit like that. They do come out different.
So
the challenges that we have. Oh, sorry, Grant, go ahead.
No, on you go.
So the challenge that we have is we're working with apple varieties to an extent, with the cider ones, with the bittersweet ones and the bitter sharp ones that are sort of 200-300 years old and are unique to a specific location, like a really small part of the UK. So when you put them up here, our climate doesn't always mesh perfectly with them. So you know, we get crazy frosts. I can't really speak for the whole of Scotland.
This is, you can. Go on. You're the cider ambassador this evening.
I know. What kind of varieties are indigenous to Scotland then? I know it wouldn't be cider apples like you get in Somerset or in the three counties, but you know, when we have apples up here. What are they? The thing is, Grant, like we actually could have indigenous cider apples or bittersweet or bitter sharp apples up here, because wildlings, seedlings grow up here exactly the same as they do down in the southwest. So when they found that tree growing out of the side of a mill in a village called Yarlington, like there's the little circuit that I ran around my village. I've counted 6 apple trees at the side of the roads. So there's one at either side of the bridge, and then there's another couple as you go in through another little village called Maryborough. And they're all just wild apples that have grown from pips chucked out of people's cars as they're driving up north. So, I mean, if you get to them and they manage to crop, then you know there's wild apple trees growing up here that could be the next Dabinet if you found them and you propagated them. It's a million to 1 chance. Do you go out looking for them? Have you picked any apples like that? Do you do any foraging for? I do.
But, yeah, I do. But you never really get. Well, I never, because everything I ferment is in whiskey barrels, and I really struggle to make cider on a small scale, like a demijohn sort of scale. So for me, I need about 400 kilos of apples to fill a whiskey cask to do something as a single variety. So I can eat them and I can taste them and stuff. And yeah, there's tannins in some of those apples that are there. Some of them are crazy sharp and they're almost like crab apples. But you know that I'm pretty sure that if you really tried and looked for them, I mean, the only reason people found these apples in the southwest is because there's that history and there's that culture of making cider. So when they bit into that apple, they thought, "Oh, I can use this for something." Whereas if you bit into that apple and you were in Inverness or in Caithness or something, you'd have gone, "This is gross. I'm not eating it," and then chuck it away and forget about it because you weren't looking for it in the same way. So I look for like the most grotesque apples that you could possibly find. Because
what's your process for that?
Well, if the birds haven't eaten them by November, then there's a good chance I'm onto a winner. Because they get hungry up here, But yeah, there's tons of apples. We've got our own. We've got an apple that's indigenous to Rossshire. It's called Cool Blash, and it's from 10 miles up the road from me, a village called Conton. Yeah, Cool Blash. It's
That's
an
a pretty
apple
cool name. That's a pretty cool name. That's not old Nobbleton's leg bender. This is like cool blush. That's pretty funky. Ryan, we've heard it on the grapevine, or via the apple orchard, as it were, that you do quite enjoy on occasion, whilst going through these orchards, to have a nibble on a leaf of an apple tree. Now, what is it about this non-fruiting part of the tree that provides some kind of interest? Because actually, I'm going to answer my own question partly. That I know that you make a cider, the Calendonian, which was one of my favourite ciders that I tasted this year. Full stop, amazing, and I think completely gone now. So if anybody's listening, you can't try it. Hooray!
Thanks, guys.
But yeah, that's really really useful. But you fermented on some kind of prunings there, and with Sanford orchards and doing their on leaf fermentation, is there something about the other sort of green or woody elements of the orchard environment that obviously have some part to play in terms of the cider making process? I found it quite fascinating.
Yeah, I mean that's what really set me going on it. I can't claim full credit for the on-leaf fermentation thing. When I think Barney put out a blog post on what he was doing with Exeter University to do the on-leaf fermentation, I just thought that was absolutely fantastic. Because anything that's innovative, like what I would consider to be genuinely innovative within cider, I'm instantly lit up by that. I just think that's a brilliant idea. So I'm not above stealing ideas and trying them out,
Bravo,
and that was
done.
That was a really good one. And I thought this is a great idea. You could go so much further with that. So yes, you can put leaves in with the fermentation, but you can also put in prunings from the orchard in there as well, and just like as in like apple wood can go into it as well. So there's tons of stuff you can do with that, and it was really just because he named the variety of the apple, of the variety of the leaves that he put in with his fermentation, and it wasn't the same variety as the apples that he had used for his fermentation.
That's right. That always seemed weird, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And I thought I've got there's got to be something to this. So because of Barney, directly his fault, I've been eating leaves in the orchard while I'm out picking. And I've tasted.
If you're listening, Barney, this is your fault. This is all your fault, Barney.
There's been several phone calls to the police about this odd gentleman eating leaves by the side of the road.
So are you saying that there's like single variety leaves, like that the variety of leaf is important kind of thing?
What I've actually learned over the last few weeks, where I've really ramped up my leaf intake, because I've been spending a lot more time in the orchard. I've been spending a lot more time out in the orchards, obviously picking the apples and having a bit of a munch at the same time. And what I've found, which is quite interesting, is there are differences. There are differences, and what I thought initially might be differences between the varieties, they're just different from tree to tree. So, like, there's a whole row at the orchard I'm picking just now. There's a whole row of majors, and there's 25 trees, and they all taste different. So I've just I don't even know where to start anymore on leaves, to be honest. They're all different.
You've gone too far down the rabbit hole, my friend.
Leave it out, mate.
Oh,
it's true. They're all different. Every single one is different. They're all different. So you can't say, Worcester pearmain's a really nice peppery sort of aroma on the leaf. Well, you go to the Worcester pearmain next door to it, it's totally different.
Are you going to do Calendonian again? Calendonian, yeah.
I would love to do it again.
Did you pick specific cuttings for that? When you did that, did you pick specific?
No, I didn't, because I wasn't sure there'd actually be a difference. And I don't know. I might do.
Well, because this is it. I mean, I know you say you can't necessarily say, that these are Dabinet cuttings or these are Dabinet leaves. But if you find this is ridiculous, but if you find a tree that you're like, holy shit, that tree tastes amazing. Really, that could be your one. That could be your guy. And it's not necessarily because of, like you said, it's not necessarily because of the variety of the apple. It's just that tree has
It's
has
different.
these.
It changes so much, and what you find. I mean, I don't know if you guys, Gabe, you probably have picked apples before from a big orchard.
On occasion.
And you get a big row
I normally get my servants to do it for me, but I have been known,
well, the gentleman cider maker that you are now.
Indeed.
You find that within a row you get variation of the apples anyway. So like on the top of the tree that's getting the sun on it, they're going to ripen faster than the ones that are underhanging and are easier to get to. And it's the same in the orchards, that they tend to be planted on a slope. So the ones at the top of the slope, personally, I have a preference for ones that are grown higher up the slope than down the slope. Again, I'm not a horticulturist, so I don't know the reasons for it, but I do spend a lot of time hanging around in orchards, eating apples and picking apples and eating leaves. So I noticed the differences, which you wouldn't get, I think, if you were machine harvesting, which for the vast bulk of my cider making career, I've only ever worked with machine harvested fruit. So it just comes in. When you're actually picking it by yourself, these sort of solitary sort of mornings, picking tons of fruit one at a time off a tree, you do notice these things more, and the differences between them, and from the beginning of the row to the end of the row, and the underside and the top side of the tree, you got to look. I spend a lot of time by myself in an orchard.
No one's blaming this, but I think this is actually just thinking off the top of my head. This is a really interesting thing, that there are a lot of cider makers, a lot of small craft, artisan, whatever you want to call it, whereby a lot of their artistry, creativity, and level of significant importance happens in the cidery. With you, I really feel, and even more so talking to you now, that you are about the orchard. The orchard is where you develop your kind of palate, and you're just then allowing the cider to kind of come through, which is really interesting. And I know that you place a real emphasis on ensuring the orchardists themselves get their dues. In your North and South cider, fantastic cider, which was a blend of your local, more acid-driven, sort of drier fruits, blended with some apples that came from Somerset, right on the Dorset border, Ross Mangle's farm, and you sort of keeved that, and you blended those two together. Fantastic kind of cider. But you really wanted to ensure that the story of Ross's orchard was really kind of paramount, and I get it. It's like any vineyard around the world, the quality of the end product starts by ensuring that the vineyard is managed is in the most exquisite way, and it's got to be the same with apples, right?
Yeah, it is. You can't make good cider from. I was going to say shit apples. I don't know.
You can say shit apples.
I can say PDT podcast. You're right.
No, there is no chance of us getting anywhere near it. All right.
From here, I'm going to town on the language then.
Martin's been very restrained this evening. He hasn't dropped any Steve bombs. He
hasn't said cunt once.
Yeah, exactly. Are you okay, Martin? You're right.
I'm just tired from such a long cunting day. But no, you can swear all you like, bud. You fill your boots with shit.
You can't make good cider out of shit apples, and I've tried. And at best you're going to get something that's passable or mediocre. So the apples are super, super important, to the point where it's actually, you'd have to actually go out of your way to really make an arse of it. If you get these apples that are perfectly ripe, and they're pristine, you know that when you're getting them back to the cidery to press them, you're going to have to do something incredibly stupid to mess it up. Because literally, especially when you're making cider at my end of the spectrum, sort of, on the sort of the natural end of it, where you're low intervention, like, what can I do to mess this up?
Well, I mean, quite a lot, actually. Just allowing things to happen is generally not a recipe for a good result. You have to put a lot of time and effort in making sure that you've got the right fruit, you got clean fruit, you got clean equipment, and all that kind of stuff. So, it's not a given. And being a wild ferment cider maker is kind of fraught with challenge. Even those cider makers that are super highly heralded, the Ross and Wise, the Olivers. Tom Oliver is always good at being painfully honest. And for all of the ciders that are just sublime and exquisite and complex and make it into the bottles, there is always a little proportion, or maybe even not such a little proportion, of cider and perry that does turn to shite. And so, or sometimes almost quite literally. And so, it's important to sort of give you sort of credit as to why it's an important thing. But before we go any further, that, ladies and gentlemen, is the horse of knowledge. And the horse of knowledge has neighed quite fervently, because wild fermentation, for anybody who is listening to the show that is not so au fait with cider terminology, a wild fermentation is where by a cultured yeast, a select yeast has not been added, and it's a case of the wild yeasts, of which there are a multitude living all around in the cider house. They and those yeasts that are coming from the orchards, potentially, they are what are undertaking the fermentation. Can add quite a lot of complexity, but you don't always get a lot of control. So that was the horse of knowledge giving. It's maybe in future I should do the horse of knowledge actually in the voice of a horse. Let's save that for next time, quite possibly.
Let's do that. So as you're explaining that wild fermentation, I want to know from Ryan, why do you do wild fermentation? What is your reason for choosing that over cultured yeasts? With, as Gabe said, you'd have more control, maybe a higher success rate. I'm not saying you have a low success rate, but shit. Well, I've really gone for it tonight.
You leaf-eating bastard, you son. What are you normal you? In a place that grows cider apples. What is your business model?
No, you have a very high success rate, don't you? But as Gabe said, I guess it's the control, isn't it, that you don't necessarily have with wild fermentation or low intervention. That what made you choose to go down that route?
So when I decided I was going to start making cider in the Highlands, which was shortly after moving up to take my whiskey job, I was a bit like a kid in a sweet shop, because for years previous I'd had to make cider to a specific style, someone else's style, or to someone else's recipe, to fit what was being asked of me, because I wasn't making my own cider. I was making cider for somebody else. So one of the things I always wanted to do was experiment with different types of yeast, and I thought this is going to be great. I'm going to do different, like these, these like 25-liter homebrew plastic barrels that you get. So I got these, and I was being really careful with this like brewer's yeast, and had this like Edinburgh ale yeast. I think it was McEwen's ale yeast. Sorry, I've got a bit of just burping.
It's not a spider, giant spider crawling down your throat, is it?
Spider's totally gone. No,
Smoking on a leaf.
What are you drinking?
I'm on the Devon Dry. I should say I'm drinking my own stuff, shouldn't I? But no, I'm drinking the Sanford Devon Dry.
You can take the boy out of Devon, see? There you go.
I only grow Devon apples, Gabe. Do you know that?
This is true.
So I did this thing. So I had like, it must have been about 8 different yeast varieties, and I was really excited about it. And I pitched all the yeast in, and it was really complicated for me to do it, because it was all different like ways of starting them off, and I had them all in these little conical flasks with foil on the top, and I pitched them all in, got them fermentations going, and almost every single one of them tasted like shite. And they tasted like shite because McEwen's ale yeast is designed to ferment at 18 degrees. The white wine yeast was designed to ferment at 20 to 24 degrees. The Saison yeast had to be like something stupid like 25 degrees.
That's so really high, isn't it? Like
all of these yeasts had their own little unique temperature things, which makes perfect sense, because like the Saison yeast was from Belgium, and in Belgium when they ferment that beer, that's the temperature.
Are you doing this in Scotland?
I'm doing this in a shed in the Highlands, in an unheated shed. So the McEwen's ale yeast from Edinburgh is a yeast that was found, discovered, grew, born, whatever you want to say, in their brewery in Edinburgh. So like that brewery temperature was on average 15 degrees. So that yeast wanted 15 degrees. If it was a yeast that wanted -5, it would never have been the McEwen's ale yeast in Edinburgh. So they were all shit. And I realized that actually I can't ferment using anything other than just the wild yeast that's on my apples already, because it's already survived the winter. So it automatically can flourish in the temperatures that we get, because if it didn't, it wouldn't be on the apples in the first place.
So you need to make a cultured yeast. You need to make a Highland yeast. So what you need to do
I
from this.
kind of do. I do have there's a sort of there's kind of a house style now, because I've been using the same barrels for years now to ferment in, and they do all have slight differences between them. But it tends to be more like it's the tail end sort of differences. So it would be like your bacterial differences for your malolactic fermentation and stuff. It goes at different rates.
Hang on. We've got the. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. That was sorry. That was supposed to be the horse of knowledge, but we managed to create some kind of chimera here and have a dolphin horse, which was not the intention.
Horse of knowledge.
The dolphin horse of knowledge is particularly inquisitive, and now that the dolphin horse has mesmerized me, I've forgotten why the dolphin horse
malolactic fermentation.
Thank you, fellow guests. Malolactic fermentation, ladies and gentlemen. This is where it's not an alcoholic fermentation.
After we've done this, can we come back to what parts of the animal are horse and what parts are dolphin?
Of course, discussed absolutely.
This can't get out of my head.
This is the neutral chimera hotel, don't worry. So the malolactic fermentation is whereby generally in the spring with ciders that have not had a lot of sulfur dioxide added as a sort of antimicrobial agent. So there's a lot of microflora in there, this wonderful range of different kinds of lactic acid bacteria. They're converting the natural, zingy, crisp malic acid that exists within the apples into a much softer, smoother lactic acid like you would get in dairy products. So it's an effective kind of softening, smoothening, and normally and hopefully adds to aid sort of complexity and maturation. Although sometimes, in my opinion, it can go too far and it can just end up tasting a bit yogurty. But that's a different question. Anyway, sorry, Ryan. Back to you. The dolphin horse is back in its cage, stable, pond thing.
Pond. You have a different life, don't you? Down in that manor, Sorry, I'm cleaning the dolphin pond this afternoon. I won't be making it out.
I imagine that would be the sound pretty much that the kelpies would make. You know, like the kelpies at Falkirk when you're driving up the road. I think that's probably what the kelpies would sound like. Could be wrong.
But in a Falkirk accent.
Yeah, it'd be more nasal.
I don't know what that is. Yeah. We don't want to offend any Falkirk listeners here. So.
Yeah, you do.
So
yeah, why? Like, what are you? What are the Falkirk listeners potentially going to be like if they somehow found the Neutral Cider Hotel?
A bunch of horse worshippers.
But not dolphin horse worshippers.
All that coming from a leaf eater. Fucking hell.
Oh, that's rich.
Anyway, the yeast you were talking about.
Malolactic fermentation.
Let's swing this right round. That dolphin horse has derailed everything.
Yeah. So the yeast is pretty consistent through my barrels for each of the fermentations. It always behaves in basically the same way. It's the tail end of the fermentation. So some of those barrels move into that malolactic thing that we talked about fairly quickly. Other ones don't really tend to do it. The malolactic, I like it in so much as I'm one of the cider makers that tends to do a lot of blending. So for me, like things that are slightly odd or things that would be unpleasant by themselves are really useful to have, like when you're actually putting your blends together. So I'll actively ferment things that are like unbelievably sharp and would be thin and unpalatable to drink by themselves. Because when I'm putting my blend together, it's quite nice to get that sort of sharpness and that acidity in it, because I've got no other ingredients to use. So in the past, maybe if I was putting a blend together, I might have reached for that bag of malic acid or something. I don't have that now because I don't have any ingredients other than apples. So the sharp ones are really useful for that. The ones that have gone through the malolactic and gone kind of a buttery sort of flavor to them, those are really useful as well, because I like a bit of that. I like a bit of butter in it, but not like really over the top. So if I was just doing like cask by cask releases, yeah, some of them would be pretty bad. But because everything I put out tends to blend, yeah.
This is, again, this all fits into the idiosyncrasy of individual barrels, of individual years, and especially what you're saying about you having, let's say, within your cidery, within your barrels, almost like a house flora now, and I'm a real advocate of this. That I think overarching, your ciders have a kind of flavor profile in broad, regardless of the actual apple varieties. There is something about your ciders. Tom Oliver has it, Ross and Y has it, Sam Nightingale has it in Kent as well. And it's making cider for years and years and years with wild yeast that you build up this flora that are the pertinent ones that get your ciders going, and they have like a sort of a signature and a stamp on it, and I think that's really, really cool and really exciting. I suppose that's a bit like lambic beers and things like that, and to sort of to recognize that is a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, like you couldn't go to a different monastery and say, oh, could you make one like this one? They make what they make. That's what they do. And I really love it. Like if instantly, like I'm a sucker for natural fermentation, basically. So if you put on your bottle that you're doing it like wild fermented, then it's almost a guaranteed sale to me, because I'm really interested to try what other people's wild yeast does. And then to try more of their products and see if they do have an overarching thing. Like you mentioned Tom Oliver before, his products are so obvious. Every single one of them is really obvious, even when he mixes it with like beer and things like that. Like, the serpent that he put out with Mills and stuff. Was it Mills? No, that wasn't Mills.
That was with Thornbridge way back in the day, but he's done a lot of work with. But you're right. There is this stamp. There is this signature of something that's
really great. I mean, if I want to taste a cider that's from Cornwall, then I would ideally, my go-to would be, right, well, okay, so who's making cider with local apples and who's making cider with wild yeast at ambient temperature? That's what I would seek out. If I want to say like, oh, okay, I've heard about this thing called cider in Hereford, so I've heard you guys make cider. I'm not going to go to, Bulmers for that. That's not what they do. Well, because they're not about that. If you know what I mean.
They are not about that.
They're making a perfectly drinkable cider, but it's not necessarily got a sense of place to it for me. And I don't think to an extent they do, right? Because if you said, right, well, I've just left my job at Bulmers and I'm going to get a job at Thatcher's and I'm going to start copying all the recipes. Well, there isn't really any recipes, and you can't do it. You can't make the same cider in a different place. I think I got my job. One of my jobs, at least, was on the grounds that I would be able to copy someone's cider that I'd made in the past.
I think we can make that assumption as to which way that was kind of going.
And much to their disappointment, it didn't happen. I can't do it.
Is that job the current one you have, the Calendonian cider one, where you thought that you could take?
I'm gonna make Rattler, the Rattler of the
Highlands. Here I
come. Yeah, I'm gonna make 10 million litres of amazing keg cider. You watch out, Scotland.
Well, we were talking then about like when you said about if you wanted a Cornish cider and those signatures that cider makers have. Were there any ciders that got you started on your journey, or any that you're really excited about now? So anyone that's listening, if they want to get an idea of what ciders you like from other makers, are there any that stand out?
Yeah, but loads and loads and loads. There's been ciders that have been really, really great, And these days, like probably in the last 5 years, I've tasted more like genuinely fantastic ciders, like ones that make you just stop and shake your head and go, wow, that's something else. I've never tasted anything as good as this. I've had more of those in the last 5 years than probably I had in the 10 years before that.
Give us some names. Give us some fucking names.
Come on. Give us some names. Don't be shy. Come on.
In the bush here, right? Yeah.
So right, I'll do a bit of promotion for everybody else. It's kind of my thing. It's kind of my thing, to be honest. No, so I really enjoyed the Albie Hill.
Yes.
Albie Hill was something else. I haven't opened the latest vintage from theirs. I've heard it's slightly different. So there was a previous vintage that I had of theirs, and I just thought like the level of elegance and poise that blend had. Even the wording on the label at the back, where they had the texture, aroma, the way they'd like. Because there was something like 17 varieties in that blend, but the fact that they'd categorized them on the back in that way just instantly made me understand what their cider maker was doing. I could understand
aroma, texture, and acidity. That's how they grouped them. Yeah,
I mean that was such a brilliant idea. I mean, just because it allowed me to think like, okay, I can see what the cider maker's done here. I can see the blend. Which is something that as a cider maker, I always tend to do. Like even if I'm tasting something that's kind of pretty mundane, I always think, oh, okay, what would I have done with that, or what would I put with this, or I wonder why that was made. You know, there's always a reason why things are the way they are. Sometimes that reason is because you've got 2 tanks that you need to empty and you've got to fill bottles. But you know, other times there's other reasons that are a bit more sort of romantic than that. So Albie Hill was really good. I really enjoyed Little Pomona's Brut Cremant. Not so much actually because of the contents of the bottle, although it was a really good cider. It was a lovely cider, but it was more that it was a cider that, because of the price point of it, I ummed and I ahed about it a lot. And I put it in my basket from the Scrattings website a lot, and I took it out of the basket and I put it back in, and I took it out, and I thought, 18 quid, like I could never tell my dad that I paid £18 for a bottle of cider. He would be distraught. So I thought, what can I do? And I thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm just going to buy it, and it'll sit there, and it was great. And this thing arrived, and it was all wrapped in. You guys have probably already had this, right? So it was all wrapped in that like orange paper with a wee sticker on it, holding it together. And I didn't even unwrap it. I just put it on my shelf, and I thought, that's the one I'm going to open at the end of the pressing season. So the last day of the pressing, I'll finish off, because my dad usually comes and helps me do the pressing. And I was like, we'll open this, and we'll celebrate the end of the season. But actually, as it happens, he fucked off to France, to Spain on holiday, and left me to finish all the pressing. So I didn't open it, and I thought, well, when's the next time to have it? At Christmas. So I took it to my in-laws, because we always go to my in-laws for Christmas. Probably not this year, but you know, they stay through in there, and I split the thing in their house. They always have like Bucks Fizz and champagne and stuff throughout the morning of Christmas. They're not cider people, you know. They're from the Highlands. They're whiskey people, really, if anything.
They're leaf eaters.
No, not yet. So
you'll turn them. Come on. Yeah, I like the optimism. The optimism's good. Sorry.
I took out my bottle of Brut Cremant, and it had just been sitting outside because it was about 2 or 3 degrees outside, so it's nice and cold. I took it in, and instead of having champagne, everybody poured out a glass of the Brut Cremant, and they loved it. It was great. It was never gonna. You know, I'm not going to tell you it's replaced champagne in their household. It hasn't, and it never will replace champagne, because champagne's what it is. But I just thought it was a really special thing that there was a cider that people who don't really drink cider were drinking for that occasion. It actually jumped in and shunted the champagne back by an extra 20 minutes. Yeah. And I think it did that not just on the strength of the liquid itself in the bottle, but because of that it was a celebration cider. And I don't think I'd ever had one. I mean, I've had cider that was as good as and better than it before, but this was a specifically this is a celebration cider. And it took cider for me into a whole new realm, into a new place where I'd never been with cider before. As someone who drinks cider almost constantly, ish, that I'd never had that before, and I think that cider, on the grounds of that, what I used it for, I was waiting for a special occasion to drink that cider. That's something I'd never ever done before.
I think Little Pomona are, as you said, yes, the contents of the bottle are generally fantastic, but what they're doing that I think is interesting is sort of being innovative and pushing the boundaries of the design and the presentation, and changing people's perception of that, because I think that's important to do that.
It's really important to do that.
Either before you try and change it in terms of taste, certainly alongside it, because most places that I'm selling these 750ml bottles to bars, restaurants, off licenses, they're not doing it by the glass. So you have to convince people to take a punt. Like you said, even you as someone who drinks cider constantly, I think you just said.
I'm a cider nerd.
To wash down the leaves. Yeah.
To wash down the leaves. the even £18 a bottle for you was like, holy shit, this is a big thing. I know.
I've done lots of interesting things. You eat one leaf, all of a sudden, I'm sure there was a joke about fucking a sheep, wasn't there?
Is present? I'm trying to keep this. This train of thought on the straight and narrow, and I'm really struggling. Is design something that's important to you? Is what I was trying to say before you mentioned fucking a sheep. Is that something that's important to you as a cider maker?
I think it is important. I don't think I've got the skill or the time that those guys put into their ciders.
The sister that is a graphic designer.
That would really help.
Yeah,
my sister works in Wickes.
That's going to be at the top of the episode. I hope you know that. My sister works in Wickes.
And other highlights from the Highland Cider Maker.
But if you do need some Dulux to the painting the walls, then you're all sorted.
Get cheap screwdrivers, But yeah, I would love to do that, and I think it's really important that someone is doing that, because basically before they came onto the scene, like if you were making really, really amazing cider, like the best cider in the country or world standard sort of cider, really from a boring sort of business point of view, you just had to hope that you would sell a lot of it. You couldn't charge any more for it. You just had to hope that you would sell twice as much as the guy next to you selling the shit cider. And it never really panned out that way. Well, not for most cider makers. So the fact that they came on the scene and said, actually, no, we are going to put more effort in, and we are going to make something that's really good and that's genuinely high end and high quality, and we're going to charge a bit more for it. It was a really important step. And it sounds ridiculous, like in hindsight, that it took somebody from out with the cider industry to come in and actually do that. But that's usually always the case, because we just carry on doing what we do, don't we?
It's a slow pace, is the world of cider, eh?
Indeed.
It seems like a nice conclusion to all, to end on the slow pace. Can I have one last thing? Can I ask if there are any Scottish cider makers that you're particularly excited about at the moment who are not called Caledonian?
Yeah, loads. At least of all, one's called Calendonian. You've. I mean, I think you guys all know Max Knoll down in Dumfries. He's making really solid ciders down there.
That's the Steelhead Cider Company.
Steelhead, yeah. He's really good. You've got a new outfit in Aberdeenshire. A guy called Christian. And he's keeving James Grieve and sort of all sorts of cookers and old-fashioned eaters and stuff. And he's getting all his apples from walled gardens and castles around Aberdeenshire. He's making some really good cider. You've got Will, my neighbour. So he's not really my neighbour. He's like 10 miles from me, up in Navarre. He's got some great apples growing in his orchard, and he's doing some really interesting things with them. Like this year, he's sort of transitioning across to wild fermentation, which is where I would like to see everybody doing, just because I want Highland cider to taste like Highland cider. So it'll be really interesting to see what his wild fermentations come out compared to mine. So I'm doing a couple of I've got a couple of barrels of Katie single variety on this year that I'm going to sell as Katie, but with the Gaelic spelling.
Very good. Well done.
So I'll be doing that, and I think Will's doing some Katie as well, and his is wild fermented up at his. So that'll be really interesting to see those side by side. I think we've started off with similar sugar concentrations, so that'll be really cool. There's cider makers all over the place. There's Digger's cider down in Perth. He's kind of like the Find and Foster of the north. You've got Norton cider down in Fife. He's doing like a sort of full method traditional sort of ciders. A lot of these guys are kind of launching next year. Because they're doing that bottle conditioned champagne method. It's taking them sort of 2 years to get to market. Whereas sort of if they'd have been doing this 10 years ago, they'd have started off doing 20-litre bag in boxes to their local pub and selling it by the pint. Whereas these guys are seeing these sort of cider makers like Find and Foster and Little Pomona and like Oliver's, and they're seeing these and they're thinking, this is where we want to be heading. Rather than when I started out making cider, it was kind of, you'd be like, well, I want to make the next Cheddar Valley, or you'd be looking at pints of dimpled glasses and pints and stuff in pubs. So there's an aspirational side or thing that's running through Scottish cider just now, where people aren't wanting to go straight in at the pound a pint stuff. They're reaching up there and they're wanting to compete with the best cider makers in Britain, which hopefully will do.
That's got to be the aspiration, isn't it? And that's a fantastic thing. And I'm sure that you won't big yourself up, but you've been grafting away and you've been forging a path for Scottish cider and demonstrating that quality artisanal and wild ferment ciders can be made up in the Highlands. And so there's a really exciting, interesting movement happening at the moment. And you're up in Scotland, and you're a really integral part of that. And we very much look forward to seeing it and drinking it as it goes forward, including those made with leaves. Ryan, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate it. I know that you're not only in the middle of the cider harvest, but your actual job is of making a whiskey as well. So you're a busy man. Thank you very much for joining the Neutral Cider Hotel. Hope that you enjoyed yourself, and we hoped to see you again sometime soon.
It was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ryan.
Sure, there's a sense of relief that you can leave now.
Oh, Christ.
Here he is. Here's the cunt.
Nice.
Nice. You just keep trying to get that line for the top of the show, don't you?
How long have you been thinking of that?
I googled leaf puns 10 minutes ago.
And on that bombshell, ladies and gentlemen, on that bombshell, Ryan, thank you, my friend.
Cheers.
And so now we are onto our cider of the week, where all three of us have a bottle of the same cider, and we taste and pontificate and generally, wax lyrical about it. This week we have the wonderful In Touch from Pilton Cider, but whereby our very own Martin Goodwin-Sharman has had a bit of an influence. Martin, take us through this little number.
So, basically, I've been buying cider from Pilton for the bottle shop I used to run and like the pub I'm in now. It's been years, and chatting online and like with my Instagram, just posting a lot of his stuff because his core range and specials are always absolute bangers. And he just said when lockdown was like in full effect earlier in the year, like, I'd love to get you down after all this is done, just to like hang out and do a blend, maybe like see if we can do something. And I just had a little tiny bit of smarts and realized that my wife's working from home, so I've got her car. And I'm furloughed, so I'm literally nothing but time on my hands. So when else are you going to get an opportunity like that? So shot down to his in Somerset, and basically he just gave me the keys to his barrel room, and socially distanced, didn't see each other until the end of the day kind of thing. And he was like, right, just try everything you want. And if you can get a blend out of it, that's cool. We'll do that. And basically he's got crazy experiments in quite a few barrels. So he's got his Keeved cider, which we explained earlier, like the natural sweetness in those. So he had different vintages of that, different stages of fermentation. So some really sweet, and some leaning towards drier. And then he had a barrel that was like smoked plums, a barrel that's like 13% cherry wine, like just trying them all together. Like one by one, my palate was shot about 10 minutes in from just an extreme tasting session. But the one barrel that I was like mad about was in the corner. It was this dry cider aged on Dunleavy, like an English winemaker's Pinot Noir skins. And without any of that sugar, this dry cider is tannic anyway. Then with the skins, it was just so wild. My mouth like puckered like more than I've ever, like it was just crumbling in on itself, kind of like craziness. So the task then in the day was like, well, how can I make that sort of palatable? How do you keep that character and give that to someone, but in a drink that they're going to want to go back to? So blended it with 2 different vintages of his Keeved cider. So all the sweetness brought that sort of crazy, wild, sour, dry character back into balance. And the end result is here. So I'm going to crack mine.
Called In Touch.
Yeah, it is called In Touch. Didn't even say that.
I don't know if he did, actually. I was like, shit, is he going to say the name? He's going to tell us what it's called? Or well, there's a great story about the kind of how this cider was unveiled or revealed to the world, right? Because I say it's just now I can say, oh, it's called In Touch, but when it was announced, it was called a very tasty cider.
Very tasty cider.
A very tasty cider, and it was it was wrapped in sort of tissue paper so as not to reveal the label or the liquid or anything. And if you bought it, as I did, straight from Pilton, that's how it arrived, and with instructions, a small brown label with instructions to not open it until the date that was specified. That Martin, you were going to appear online, unsheathing the cider bottle,
the blend,
the master blender was gonna unveil his creation. So I thought that was a really cool start to the whole story of the cider. And I mean, I opened it. I didn't watch the thing live because I was washing my hair or something. But thanks,
bud.
No, it's cool. but I did try it without taking the sort of the tissue paper off, and it was I don't know, just thought it was a really interesting new way of trying a cider for the first time. I thought it was cool.
Yeah. So with lockdown, it's kind of put a lot of spanners in a lot of works, and with coronavirus as like a whole, its impact on hospitality and the industry of like cider has been sort of insane. And watching people kind of quickly, all these cider makers who are usually stuck in their ways, kind of country bumpkins, this is how I've always done it. A lot of those people were forced to reinvent their whole kind of strategy business model on the fly. And Martin's one where a lot of his ciders have a sense of the theatrics, like the naming, the labels anyway. And he set up I think it was the Southwest Cider Week, which it was released for, with a couple of cider makers and set up events. And it just happened to work really well with it. And he asked me to write a poem or do some writing on the side of it as well. So it was like a crazy reveal, sad, depressing poem about lockdown. It was like Cornish boys fitter, happier, more productive.
Yeah, with less beats.
You've also got quite hieroglyphic handwriting as well. We learn to understand.
A spider, it's like a spider assaulting a pen. It's like real scribbly, but it was honestly, he put it up in his font originally. Like I'd just written like kind of vignette lines over a couple of days in lockdown, and it was kind of, do an info dump because it's what it felt like, where just at the time it was like everything was going 10,000 miles an hour over and over again, and just the news daily was like, I've never experienced anything like that, so having it reflected in that was cool. But he'd done it in his Pilton fonts, and it just looked like weird Radiohead artwork. So I was like, oh no, you want to humanize it more, because otherwise it is like just digital sake. So it was weird that it nearly went there and then it came back, and it's sort of ended up in this weird cool middle ground.
Yeah, I like the label. I think it's really it's a really creative way of presenting it, and it's something that I always look for in cider. Well, anything they drink, you know, if you haven't tried it yet, what are you going to base your choice on? I'm not saying crap cider with interesting labels is something that I would get behind, but luckily this is a good cider with a good label. So
thanks, Bob. Taste wise, what are we thinking?
You can tell underneath all the sweetness that's there, although it's the great balance between the intent. Obviously, there is some quite intense astringency and some grippiness under there, and some sort of stone fruitiness that is intermingling with a bit more of the softer, juicier accessibility of the Kiev, and some nice sort of spicy notes. I think it's gorgeous. It's just a real nice sort of a hug, and it's warming. This is a nice sort of fireside kind of drink, or have it with some maybe some slightly richer meats, if meat is your thing, not for you guys. Or
we've got some leaves.
We've got some leaves. Yeah. What else is there to possibly eat? I think it's great, and I just love everything about it. I love the fact that it's collaborative, which cider is doing better than it was, getting people together. If not because of the nature of the process, you can't really do the collaborative, brew ideology anywhere near as easily as you can with beer. So being creative with how to involve other people in the process of creating this drink, I think is something really fun and really, really exciting, and that Martin does particularly well, and introducing sort of art and creativity as an experience into the drink is great. But yeah, from a taste point of view, it's lush, isn't it?
Yeah. I like that kind of bitterness that kicks through the sweetness of the Kiev, which can be all you get from a Kiev cider is just this apple juice, because that's essentially what it is, and it's hard to get past that. But this has that the kind of the sort of sharp berry flavor kind of at the end that just it just takes away that the sweetness that you get with a Kiev cider that can sometimes just last forever without changing on your palate, if that makes sense. It's just that apple, but this has got a really nice kind of bitter sort of, like the kind of skin of a stone fruit that you get before you bite into the flesh. It's amazing. It's really lovely.
Well, it's built out of, even though I've blended it, Martin's big inspiration from American cider, and he's quite local to a lot of sort of first tier English craft beer producers. So like Wild Beer, who were experimenting and collaborating just like non-stop in ways that weren't just for the sake of putting a label on something. It was all about like pushing everything forward. So he's always had that mindset of like, how can I do that with my thing? And he is an artist as well, and his partner's an artist. And you could see he's always been like, how it's presented needs to match the sort of product I'm creating. Yeah. So I'm glad that he didn't just go, so I'll just make like another house cider. It was like, no, let's really go all out on it.
I mean, I my first introduction to Pilton cider was the Max Lux when it was the screen printed label. And it was in Bristol, and I was like, holy shit, this cider maker's screen printing his labels. How amazing, but how expensive. How is he making this work? And then the next batch I got, he'd moved on from that. but it was, it was that completely drew me in. Looking at this line up in the shop, and then you see this screen printed label, you're like, holy shit, that's great. And it's still, Max Lux is still one of my favourite ciders I think I've ever had. Partly the connection to it being the first Pilton I'd had, and I was in Bristol, but it's a brilliantly made cider.
Yeah, well, with going back to what you're saying about the label and like standing out, it's not only got to stand out in terms of cider, it's got to stand out in terms of every category to the drinker. Yeah. So like in the bottle shop, I had it where I put cider in between. The way the shop was laid out, it was essentially like crazy European beers at the end, cider nestled next to natural wine. So it literally had to stand out next to breweries like Pohala and Tool and Omnipollo, who have some of the best branding going, and then like new winemakers who just are blowing it out of the water. So it isn't good enough just to be like, oh, it's got an apple on the label. Like a lot of these ciders are having to step up. And as testament, I know I'm a huge fan of Oliver's, but for years I was berating him for it because I had to convince people that the inside of the bottle was much better than the outside. I was like, no, please just take this home.
Try this Shazam.
The label doesn't match it. Yeah, like, and he'll take it as a hit. He keeps going, oh yeah, thank you for bringing that up again. But his artistry is not reflected by that basic print. And now it works with the fine cider branding that he's got because it's a sense of elegance and it's brand in itself. But before it was like, I can't tell you, I had like 12 lines of Oliver's and there were about 7 different label designs. It was wild. And you're trying to tell people like, and this is people's first interaction with cider. And you're like, no, honestly, he is cohesive and he is brilliant.
It's not some schizophrenic cider maker that's trying to,
Yeah, but I'm glad that we're there now. I know a lot of people that are getting into cider, especially this year and like just at the end of last year, are saying that it's like, it looks great, but it's taken a long time to get a lot of the makers there. Like Gabe, how many years of it has it been for you of just, you must have had these same chats?
Well, it's nigh on 20 years, I suppose. From first tasting and sampling the Oliver's. Oliver's, remember the sort of the first suite of ciders from smaller producers that I've really got into. There was some Oliver's, some Ross and Weiss, some Dunkerton, some Butford Organics, and some Sheppies, and probably some Borough Hill. And yeah, it was not the branding per se that sort of drew in. It was the idea and the concept of what these kind of ciders represented. But it's 20 years ago, and you think about how much has changed, not just in cider, but in society, and especially when it comes to drink. And the the discerning kind of consumers and the importance of drawing people in and telling a story that is not just the fact that this is a drink made from apples from orchards and it's a traditional drink, but that there is a value to it that should be celebrated and enjoyed. And I tell you what, it really is in only the last 5 years, maybe even 3 years that.
Yeah, three.
An excitement for me, just a personal excitement around, these new products, how they're presented in the packaging type, in terms of maybe even interesting sort of bottle shapes, in terms of how the language that's being utilized, how they're describing themselves, what kind of artwork and design that's being utilized. It's just, I think it's the most exciting time for cider, and for this year, the first time, and almost either in spite of COVID or maybe sort of because of it as well. In the springtime, when all of these sort of new releases of ciders came out from the likes of Oliver's and Pilton and Ross and Wye and Once Upon a Tree and Little Pomona and many more, Nightingales and all sorts, for the first time, a microcosm of actual buzz about it. If not quite people queuing up at the brewery, the cider maker door, as it could be for new releases from any kind of famed brewery like that. But for people to be aware that there's an exciting new cider coming up and not wanting to miss out on the opportunity to get involved in that limited edition, that's something new for me. And previously I had always kind of thought, if a cider maker's got something, I'll be able to snaffle a bottle here or there or something. That's absolutely not the case now. When they're gone, they're gone. And so I need to be in there as a punter as quick as anybody else and not just blag it. And that's brilliant. That is absolutely brilliant and really indicative that it's starting to be this buzz, this little bit, not quite further, we're not quite there, but people trying really kind of getting excited and valuing these different things. And this cider, I think, is really, really emblematic of that shift which is happening right now. So good on Martin at Pilton, and good on our beloved Martin here on Neutral Cider Hotel for being the master blender. Thank you so much,
Never
everybody.
blend.
It's a great drink. Go check it out. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, bud. Yeah. Just fucking buy it. If this isn't an advert for it, just fucking buy it. Even if you already had it.
You heard the man. So now it's the time for us to act as the agony aunts for all of the cider fans out there as we endeavour, to the best of our ability, to answer your questions. I'm going to kick off first because there's a question from Mark Shirley, who is he's a long-standing cider maker, actually from the East Midlands and sort of a camera member, etc. And he's asked, is it a good thing that some enthusiasts and producers are happy to sidestep the knowledge around known and obvious faults in cider and call them interesting, in quote unquote? And there were a couple of other questions that sort of similarly played around that. Is it okay to call a cider funky if actually it's just kind of faulty? So where does the line land in terms of interest and funky, and that being a good thing or a bad thing? What do we think?
Well, for me, I'm looking at it like in comparative terms. I think there are some songs that are punk and the mix is a bit bad, but it's all about being matching the ethos and is intended by the maker as such. And that's with cider as well, where some stuff is like, oh, that's a bit abrasive, that's a bit this, and like those volatile notes can actually amp it up. But if you're just conning the drinker and going, no, it is funky, then they'll know. Like, you don't have to be discerning to know when something's crap. But for me, I like a bit of those kind of rugged, aggressive kind of tones. But I'm also buying those ciders that give me that. If you get that in something where it's not intended and then they say after the fact it's funky, I think you're being ripped off.
I mean, I think you saying, you don't need to to have knowledge to know that something's crap. I think you do, certainly with cider, because I think certainly some of the ciders that we would drink in the 750ml formats, you could give someone without the knowledge a great cider and they might think that it's crap because it doesn't taste like Magners or Strongbow. But then at the same time, does it really matter? I mean, if someone likes, if people like it, if people enjoy something that's described as funky and it's been made by someone with zero experience and it's a complete fluke, is that not okay? Yeah, I don't know. It's a really difficult question, I think, because
well, going to your fault thing then, and being like a well-made cider, the question about it being faults, if it's got that many faults, it can't be that well-made cider. So it's just down to the eye of the beholder, isn't it? Really,
I think you're right. I think that the consumer, if something is faulty, so that it has a number of sort of analytical faults in there, the consumer will ultimately be the arbiter of whether they like it or not and will purchase it or not. And if it's really that bad and that faulty, then the majority of consumers won't like it and won't purchase it, and it won't be good in the marketplace. If it does have a little bit of acetic acid on the aroma that adds a little bit of sort of spicy complexity, but isn't so much that it actually dominates and actually is like pure vinegar, then that probably is a good thing. And then obviously it's all down to that individual subjectivity too. So I think the consumer is getting better understanding what constitutes a good cider. I think you're absolutely right, Grant, though, that the level of knowledge and understanding, even in the trade as well, about when a cider is in a good state or not, is so considerably more poorly understood for cider than for other drinks. So it's a bit of an education piece. It's a bit of a just letting the drinker tell us what they want. But once again, sort of context is everything. A Cider Natural from Asturias or the Basque Country, drunk without any knowledge or understanding that it's actually supposed to have some volatile acidity, some light vinegar character is supposed to be there. Doesn't mean that the more vinegary the better, far from it, but it is supposed to be there. If you didn't know that and you were expecting a lovely, clean, fresh, easygoing drink cider, then it would naturally come as a bit of a shock. And it's just the exploration of the wealth of different types and styles and sort of processes that are out there that cider makers are undertaking. So everyone's just going to have to drink a lot more cider and get on board and make their own decision, really.
I had that with the first cider I had. I was blown away at the time by Once Upon a Tree. And they had a cider called Dorothy's Orchard, which was super clean, elegant. It was almost like Chardonnay made with apples to a point of like just really gentle, gorgeous, like vinous character, but all about apples kind of thing. And my mate bought me a bottle back from his holiday. He was like, "Oh, I got this cider for you." And I opened this bottle and I was like, "Oh, I'll pour it carefully." And I was like, "Mate, it just tasted fucking like vinegar." And now I'm like, "Oh, I wish." Obviously, the instructions are in Spanish.
Well, the picture of this guy doing this.
No, it was one of those, like, it was just like it was a hand-drawn label just from like a small Spanish cider maker who's obvious. So just the context, like you say, is everything, because it doesn't matter how good you are, smart you are, whatever. No one thought, "Oh, I've bought this. They were pouring it like that. I'll tell my mate." Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But also, it's just a good one to learn from.
Definitely. So carrying on from that, talking about experience and understanding and knowledge, I have a question here from Gemma on Instagram, which is where to start. 35 and only just got the hang of wine. So I guess, do you have a cider that you would recommend to someone who's wants to try it, wants to start exploring it, but doesn't know where to start, what would you, Gabe? Do you have a cider that you kind of go, okay, this is a good starting point? Not a Strongbow, not a Magners, but
you want to try and make it as easy as possible and go for ciders that are easily accessible. So ciders you can get in the supermarket. So as sort of two places to start, as an example of a classic kind of like West Country style cider, or a cider at least that contains quite a lot of tannin and that sort of tradition, heritage, and culture. I'd go for the Hennies. The sort of the medium dry Froome Valley cider that he makes, you can get in Tesco's, and a 500ml bottle I think it's a great cider. It is a great, it's got complexity. I was going to call it easygoing. I don't think it is easygoing. It's got some complexity to it, but it's got just the right amount of sweetness to balance off, and just enough acidity in there. It's fresh, it's fruity, but satisfyingly drying. I once drank a whole bottle. I say a whole bottle. It's 500ml. Drank a bottle in about one glug after mowing my grand's lawn on a particularly hot day. 20 years ago, I had to have a lie down for 3 hours afterwards, so that was fun. So don't do that, but just enjoy it, because it is really, really tasty and easily available, and very, very reasonably priced. And then if you want to try something that is sort of a bit opposite, and is sort of light, lean and crisp and fresh, go for something from Scully, a South African cider brand available in Sainsbury's. Go for their Granny Smith single variety. Light and crisp, exactly what you expect from biting into that kind of apple. So those are two good places to start. If you were to go for those, then the drinker would know that maybe they liked the sort of the boldness and the complexity that comes from the tannins, or more of the lighter, fresh fruitiness that comes from those more dessert-driven apple ciders. And then go down the rabbit hole, with some more of the Eastern Counties and Kentish ciders, if it's more of the Scully type flavors that they enjoy. And that experience, or if they like the tannin, well, then they can delve into the world of Herefordshire southwards, really, and get on that tannin train. So that's what I would do,
Martin.
Well, when you said they've just started getting into wine's the kind of like thing for me of. A lot of people that come to cider from beer or wine, and they're like wine-like ciders or beer-like ciders, and then they find a love for ciders from cider makers who are making it. So, long story short on that, just because they've said wine, the ones that I've given to my family members, because they love wine, are Find and Foster, especially their Hutchison blend down in Devon. Just really clean, elegant stuff that just loads of vibrant fruit character, but just so sort of there's complexity there, but it's so gentle and effervescent that you can just easily pour that into a fluted glass and share that between you in no time. And the other one I've got that I had at Christmas, I think someone gave it to me, is Eve's Cider, Albie Hill. From Restalk. It's kind of a play on word because it's like restock.
How do you spell that?
Don't forget the colon. Don't forget the colon.
It's Recolon's talk. Recolon. But yeah, no. So Albie Hill, it's just gorgeous, like nice, clean acidity, bright, and then there's that kind of, from memory, it was that kind of stone fruit, appley character, just wonderful, like absolutely wonderful. And we all had it, and my family were like, for me, I have a big bottle of cider, and I'm like, oh, do you want a little bit? And they go, yeah. And then this was one of them where they were like, no, I want more. And you're like, well, this is mine. I've brought this. Yeah. Can I have it? But if just from the wine side of it, those are two that I would recommend if you were going to try that coming from like the wine world.
Good. Very good choices there.
What's yours, Grant? You got to choose.
Okay. I would probably go with the Dunkerton's organic. It was mainly because that's where I started, and this was at a point where my cider knowledge and experience was as limited as anyone's. And I worked in a little deli shop, and they sold this 330ml bottle of Dunkerton's organic cider, and tried it. I was like, oh shit, that's really nice. And it's in a format that's recognizable in terms of cider. It's a 330ml bottle rather than a 750, which is something that I think maybe some people might sort of struggle with at first. It's not, it's not crazy big bold tannins in there. It's a quaffable, nice fruity cider that I think most people would enjoy. And again, coming from a wine perspective, Gospel Green probably. And again, it would be an occasion where you might replace that for a sparkling wine. But when I've done that with people, and had people try Gospel Green poured into a flute or a wine glass, then they struggle often to even tell the difference between that and a sparkling wine. And I think again that it quite quickly switches people's perception when they taste it, and like, oh, this is what cider can be like. And from there, but it's good that Gospel Green doesn't feel like it's very difficult to enjoy, although it is, you can find complexities in it, but it's, a method traditionnel cider, in the same way that method traditional wine, people will enjoy it in the same way, if that makes sense. So yeah, it would be Gospel Green and Dunkerton's organic for me.
What's good with that, and you just even saying about the kind of wine-like style and that Gospel Green. It is Gospel Green in it. I'm not saying Gospel Oak. It's Gospel Green. I didn't want to be like, listen to this back and go, I've just said a fucking tube stop. But a lot of people, even people listening to this podcast, that might just be getting into cider, might not be aware of how different those techniques are and how much they impart on cider. Like, a lot of people love cider for a region, and like a lot of my mates down in Cornwall know cider by like the kind of scrumpy that they've grown up in. So even the fact that it can, like you say, replace a glass of sparkling wine like that, it's silly of us to even take it for granted that that's still a big revelation for some people.
Yeah.
And my question today, on my phone, that the screen's gone black on. There you go. My question today is from Oscar of the band Listing on Instagram. He said, and I'm going to just turn this question. He said, which cider is best? Now, he's being a knobhead there, but also I want to now make it, what cider do you think for you is like the cider? Like, if it doesn't matter what anyone says, and it doesn't have to be the best ever or the best at this, what's the one that you drink and go, fuck, this is good? Feel free to say in touch, lads.
The cider that now I go to as my fridge cider, as in something I have in there that I'll drink for any occasion. Special, non-special. Those are my two occasions. Would somewhere
in the middle.
Right now.
Oh God! Yeah, that's the.
Right now is not even an occasion, Gabe. So it's occasionless.
Run of the mill.
It would be the Oliver's Gold Rush.
Oh, you fucker!
What?
That's mine.
Well, but isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? That
I think we've proven that
so high
There is
regard.
the best, yeah. No, but you go on with it because
No, that-
I'll think of something else.
I bet you will. I just no. I think it's. I mean, it's something that maybe should be in a 750. I know he's got the raw Gold Rush in a 750, but it's just, I don't know. It just packs this amazing punch that I think it was the first one I had was 6. I might have had it before, but it wasn't like wasn't really aware of it being a thing or a regular release or anything like that. But the first one I really remember going, "Oh, right, okay," because this is a yearly release from Oliver's, and it just, I can't believe that there are no additional flavors in it. There's so much going on. I'm just like, okay, there's you know, there's obviously there's apple there, there's plum, there's smoke, there's berries, there's peach. It just is incredible, and every bottle and every sip to me just kind of tastes different in a way, and it's just a phenomenal cider.
For me, well, it's not around anymore, unfortunately. Sheppy's Goldfinch just used to embody. It was just fun, brisk, bright, but a bit chewy, with a nice picture of said Goldfinch on the front and lightly sparkling. It was a beaut. It just always made me smile, and it just hit the mark every single time. So it was a sad day when it was delisted. I was given the final bottle that was on the shelf until I found out it wasn't the final bottle. So it made it slightly
I
less
even did a
worthy.
sigh.
I know. So that was something that really sort of embodied what everything was all about. Today, oh god, I don't know, so many. Ross on Wye, because that's where I learned to make cider, I suppose, and that the first visit to the cellar and Mike pouring a dry cider and pouring a cider out of one of the barrels in the cellar under the farmhouse. That's where the cider used to be sold, and saying, "Here you go. This is a dry cider. See what you think." And the sip of that first cider, the memory of it is so vivid, beyond it going like just the taste of it, but just it was like a whole new world was being sort of unlocked in my mind. It was amazing, and a taste of those ciders, and maybe a topic for another occasion. Maybe Ryan alluded to about these wild yeasts and how they have different impacts of flavors. I really do believe that every cider maker that does undertake wild fermentations, they have their own unique blend and mix of different sort of yeasts that have quite a strong important sort of signature over the overarching flavor profile beyond apple varieties and barrels and things. Oliver's wild yeasts do sort of taste different, it seems, to the Ross on Wye to any other. And I don't know, I like the Ross on Wye wild yeasts. I think that flavor profile just kind of does it for me. So that's probably my comfort blanket right there. So not a bad mix.
Martin, what's yours?
What's your favorite cider?
I'm glad you asked.
What's the best cider for you?
But no, it's a similar thing with the Gold Rush as to what you're saying, and with what Gabe's saying of that moment. But like, I first had Gold Rush when I was in the Cock Tavern, and I was basically, we had 8 cider pumps, and it was just, it didn't matter what you put on, kind of thing. And so you could just be experimental, crazy, anything like that. Because the turnover on it, cider drinkers would just drink whatever there was, really, which was crazy to me. And I found Oliver's through the Real Ale Company, and we had a couple from him, but Gold Rush number 4, I think it was, either 3 or 4. I'm going to say 4 because I don't think it predated that. But the flavour of that coming from like a beer term and like learning about wild yeast and like all the kind of lambics and all this and getting into that side of beer, here was this essentially bag box juice that was so crazy, intense, delicate, peppery, savory. It was like walking through an orchard in a glass. It was insane. And it cost $3.90 a pint. It was just, if for a beer lover, that's like, if you were to have anything that was in a barrel for 2 years minimum, like you're looking at like 25 quid. So it was just like a world opened where it was like, you can do this. And meeting Tom, the Euston cider tap, not too long after that, I was just like, how do you do this? And Gold Rush for me is one where I clearly have a marker in my mind of trying it. But since then, I've tried every iteration, and watching it change kind of over the years and change. I change as I go with it as well. It's my kind of marker in the sand of like, this is all the time. It's not that it's like the craziest technical one. It's that and it's super drinkable. It's sessionable gorgeousness, even if it's 6.5 or whatever. Every iteration I've had, I've bought numerous bottles of because I look and my glass is empty before I want it to be every time.
Nice.
Well, there we go.
Good choices in there.
Very, very profound, everybody. Well done. Well, I think that just about wraps up everything for this week's episode of the Neutral Cider Hotel. Lots of new information learnt, including the eating of leaves. Who knew? Maybe that'll be a trend. That'll be a thing.
The dolphin horse. Jesus.
Yeah,
we invented a species.
We did.
Yeah, the people renting room 313 tonight are leaf eating dolphin horse. So it's a fucked up hotel.
It's a good name for a band, I'd say, Leaf Eating Dolphin Horse, but we'll save that for another time, another podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you have enjoyed your stay at the Neutral Cider Hotel, that the bathroom plug hole wasn't too blocked with hair from previous people, and that the drinks cabinet was nice and full. We had a great time. Hopefully, we'll see you staying at our wonderful hotel another time. Wassail. Cheers.